Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Hestuwu, and the Legend of Zelda series has a lore problem. Let me walk you through my experience with the lore and world building of this franchise. To preface, I have a fascination with fantasy lore, beginning with Lord of the Rings, and the interconnectivity of that world established itself as my benchmark for how I view fantasy lore in general. Now, let me begin by saying that I absolutely adore this franchise. The Legend of Zelda series was one of the first video games I was truly enthralled with, and from an early age to now, it's only grown with me. First game was A Link to the Past on Game Boy Advance, and while the gameplay, character design, dungeons, and unique items kept me going through a multitude of playthroughs, it was the lore that really hooked my interest. A mysterious past, sacred ancient relics abound, and that feeling that we're ending a centuries-old war against Ganon really made the world feel fleshed out and lived in. My mind was blown. And next came Ocarina of Time. And that was the first time I really encountered something that involved time travel in a compelling way. The hero of time traversing space-time itself created what felt like to me to be such a grand, epic adventure, the scale and gravity of which was unparalleled. I still shudder at the memory of exiting the Temple of Time as an adult for the first time. When it was revealed that Ocarina of Time was a prequel to A Link to the Past, recounting the events of the first imprisoning war, you couldn't imagine my excitement at the prospect that the games in this franchise were interconnected. We even got a sequel in Majora's Mask, giving some nice closure to the Hero of Time story, which, if you don't know the ending of Ocarina of Time, real quick. Link and Zelda seal away Ganondorf, and Zelda sends Link back to his original time to warn the royal family of Ganondorf's betrayal, before he can rise to power. This generates two parallel timelines in the process. In adult Link's time, they can now rebuild, and the G-Man, not the Half-Life one, was defeated. In Kid Link's time, G-Man was thwarted and tragedy never befell Hyrule. Great stuff! Now, things got a little bit messier. I won't recount the entire timeline. There are plenty of videos by other excellent creators who have gone over that quite in depth. And that's also not the point of this video, but as later games came out, it was made clear that Wind Waker was also a sequel to Ocarina of Time. Okay, so it's a continuation of the adult timeline, where Zelda, in her infinite wisdom, sends Link back to be a kid, and in doing so, she actually broke the Triforce and left the adult timeline without a hero. The goddesses have to flood Hyrule upon Ganondorf's return. Sad. Okay, sure, the world would need a hero when the time came, and if Link's the only one who can defeat G-Man, and he's absent, I guess the deluge could also solve the problem? Harsh, but if the gods will it, I suppose. Then came Twilight Princess. It didn't seem to connect to the previous game, as Hyrule was supposed to be an ocean by this point. And what's this? The hero's shade? Heavily implied to be the hero of time making an appearance in this game? So this is also a sequel to Ocarina of Time. We would have confirmation later that the answer is yes! This is a continuation of Child Link's timeline, long after Majora's Mask. We see the sages that we've met in Ocarina of Time, and we find out that after the hero of time, the child, warned the royal family, Ganondorf was executed. Hardcore. But these sages don't look like the ones we knew from Ocarina of Time. They look more like ghosts or spirits, and they're called ancient sages. So how much time has passed to turn the sages into these ethereal forms? Add to that, this seems to be a completely different Hyrule. Some landmarks remain, But where are the Gerudo? What is the Arbiter's Grounds, and why didn't we see that in Ocarina of Time? It must have existed during that time, since G-Man was executed as a direct result of the events of the Child timeline. Why would they build this massive dungeon for the sole purpose of Ganondorf's execution? Surely that would take far too long, and they need to get rid of him ASAP, right? Was Ganondorf imprisoned in a regular jail for decades? Centuries? Dare I say millennia? And I'm not even gonna go into the Dark Interlopers / Mirror of Twilight, because that is a whole other rabbit hole that doesn't seem to have any direct parallels to the previous games. Maybe Majora's Mask? And it's still a hot topic of lore debate. And there's this huge elephant in the room. What about the original Legend of Zelda and its sequel, The Adventure of Link? Where the hell does that happen? Because at this point, I resign myself to these are all just legends interpretation. Why are there references to other games? Because it's cool. And these are kid games after all, right? As in real life, it made more sense to me that there was one Legend of Zelda, and all these games are variations on that narrative after being passed down through generations and different cultures. Sure, there were some definitive sequels, like Wind Waker and Majora's Mask, but the other games just felt too disconnected. More games were released, and I became less and less interested in the lore and the world-building aspects. But enter Skyward Sword and Hyrule Historia. Suddenly, in 2011, we got Hyrule Historia and Skyward Sword. Hyrule Historia was an officially licensed lore Bible about the Legend of Zelda series, Skyward Sword being the latest entry in the series, and this was the big one for us lore nerds. In Skyward Sword, we got an answer to the origin of the Master Sword, an explanation for the recurrence of Link, Zelda, and Ganon throughout each game, through the Curse of Demise. We are introduced to the goddess Hylia, and Skyward Sword was stated to definitively be at the start of all the timelines. Essentially a prequel to Ocarina of Time. Love it! Cycles and reincarnation are sweet. Hyrule Historia also had a fully fleshed out timeline. And what's this? A third timeline? Yes, a timeline where the hero of time is defeated by Ganon, wherein A Link to the Past, Legend of Zelda, and Adventure of Link all take place. Okay. Why would that split the timeline? It specifically says this split happens when Ganon defeats Link. Following this logic, there should be a fourth timeline, wherein Link is killed before he even reaches Ganondorf, and the world is plunged into darkness, but we don't enter the Downfall timeline. We just never see that timeline ever referenced, because I guess it's bad and self-explanatory, I suppose? Is this a multiverse where each time the player sees a game over, a new timeline's created? There were still too many questions. Now that we have a timeline that's officially approved by Nintendo, we can't just use the "these are all legends" interpretation anymore. But now we come to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the absolute saviors of Legend of Zelda lore. Every attempt to retroactively fix or add to the timelines have only led to more problems with said timeline lore. And it seems, in my opinion, that Nintendo's recognized this. I do see Breath of the Wild as a functional reboot. However, Tears of the Kingdom shows us that they aren't throwing away everything that came before. They're letting us have our cake and eat it too, just as they have when making these games. If you're a purist and insistent in holding every event of the past games as canon, you're free to do so, because the amiibo items, for a lack of a better term, have now been canonized. However, Nintendo is also saying these are all legends. It says so right in many of the amiibo item descriptions. For example, the Fierce Deity mask reads, "Legends say this mask was once worn by a hero from a world in which the moon threatened to fall." Maybe these are not different takes on the same legend. I would argue that's not the case. But placing Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom so far into the future affords us the freedom to not have to justify the many timeline inconsistencies. We are free once again to think of the past games, the timeline split, and all the inconsistencies as legends, while still retaining relics from these past eras, showing that these legends did actually happen at some point in the very distant past. So, to wrap up this long-winded rant, I really don't want to seem like I am just dumping all over these games. When self-contained, each one has a decently cohesive narrative with interesting backstories. It's just when trying to merge every game into one narrative that things get incomprehensible. In my view, Nintendo fixed this with Tears of the Kingdom. They didn't retcon the events of past games, they canonized them as legends in this new timeline. Maybe you disagree with my assertion, and I want to hear about it in the comments. I love having conversations about this kind of thing with people that have put similar thought into it and maybe have completely different experiences than me. If Tears of the Kingdom is your first Zelda game, I want to hear what you think about this theory and what you think about the other games as well. Is this just a bunch of mumbo jumbo that Nintendo haphazardly threw together as an afterthought? Or is there really some grand narrative that we can piece together here? I just want to shout out Moxie Watts, Zeltic, Laurelian Historian, Commonwealth Realm, Thinking at Max Volume, and all the other Zelda lore YouTubers out there for reinvigorating my interest in this franchise. So thank you for watching. I want to dive into more lore theories regarding Zelda, as well as other games, such as the Dark Souls, Born, Ring, Rico games. We'll just call them Fantasy from Software games. We'll just call them Fantasy from Software games. And as well as other things. I'm a musician. I want to do score analysis. The Tears of the Kingdom soundtrack is incredible, and it informs so many of the world-building aspects of this game, and I just feel like not as many people are talking about that. Maybe because it's a sequel to Breath of the Wild, and in general, people were kind of let down by that soundtrack. I don't feel that way, but that is kind of the consensus, and it's really a shame. If you haven't, go watch 8-Bit Music Theory's 4-part series on the soundtrack to Breath of the Wild. It might change your mind. So, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, there will be more videos like this, so please subscribe. Maybe click the little like button if you feel so inclined, but definitely leave a comment if you agree with me, if you disagree, if you just want to talk about something else entirely. I am all open for that. So until next time, see you later.